real things across generations. Generational banter.
Real talk about real things across generations. Generational banter.
What's up, mommy?
What's up, Neil? How you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. We've been on a little bit of hiatus. Do you want to tell people who you are for our first timers, for the people who haven't seen us before? Who are you?
Well, I'm Nalaja. I'm a co-host of Generational Banter, and I'm the daughter of the two of us. Yeah, that's who I am.
And I say you're the creator of this whole thing. You said, hey, I want to do this.
I am.
All right, so that's who she is. And I'm Damali Robertson, co-host, mom, and the elder in the generation of the generational banter. So, how's your week been? Tell me all about it.
I mean, my week has been fine. All I do is the same thing, work, and repeat. So, I mean, my week's been fine. What about you? Ain't nothing changed.
My week's been glorious because the rain stopped. And I know I'm supposed to be happy when there's rain. But, I'm still working that out. So I love it when it's sunny. And today is sunny in the Bay Area. So my week's been pretty glorious. And I feel like it's been a full time. There's been a lot of work. We paused a little bit on recording because we record in our home studio at home. And there was some work being done on the house. And so it just didn't come together. So I feel like part of my week that's been really good is the work is behind us, and that way we could get started again. And today we actually want to talk about a pretty big topic, grief and healing when you've experienced grief. And so, I wanted to tag into something we did together last night to kind of talk about the fact that, grief seems to be a universal, it's a universal experience, and sometimes it surprises me, and I think it surprised you. So tell me a little bit about what we did last night. Share about that.
Yesterday we went to go see the movie Origin, which is about Isabel Wilkerson, let me get that right, and her book Cast, which is very good, heavy, very emotional, but very good, very, very good. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, so you said it's about her book Cast.
And her life,
Well, I was just about to say, and I thought I'm going to go see a movie about Cast only. So I was kind of like ready to dig in because I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to Isabel Wilkerson, her books, and like some of the things that she's written about, including the caste systems in the United States, I believe in Germany and India. And so, I was like all there ready. And then when I went to the movie and realized that a kind of sub-story was about the grief she had been experiencing while she was writing and promoting that book, that just took, it first of all, it was so unexpected for it to be that in-depth, and then it kind of hit me. And this is what grief does. It kind of hits you. You're like, oh, yeah, I know what this is. I know some form of what she had experienced, and yet she experienced it triple. So it's like, whoa, how did she do that? Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated the movie. It definitely is a segue to have this conversation about grieving and healing. And like I said, it was a lot. Don't get me wrong, but these are conversations that need to be had. So, but I was gonna say, one thing I've learned about grief, I've seen a lot of people around me grieve other than my family, like friends have lost parents and grandparents as well. Other family have lost big people in their lives, and it just further shows me that grief, it's never ending, and you have to deal with it. That's the thing. Shrugging it off or like trying to push it under the rug doesn't help anything. That's what I've definitely learned about grieving. So even seeing you grieve, it was interesting because a lot of people say when you're in the emotion of like planning things out, trying to figure out, oh, now that this person has passed, we got to figure out what to do with their stuff. We got to plan their service. We got to do this, that, and forth. So in a way, you were kind of like pushed into action of handling business for Grandpa, but didn't really, I don't think, really had time to grieve until after coming back. There were like little moments, you know, but yeah. Like when I got the call about my grandfather, first person I thought about was my mom. So, yeah.
Well, here's a couple things you just said there that I want to talk about. I think you said, you know, you can't shrug it off, but you know what I recognize about grief too? Sometimes you can't deal with the full force of it either. Because my dad died in February of 2022. And first of all, I remember the moment. I remember getting a phone call. I remember trying to process it. Being away, I had been in a whole nother country, doing a whole other thing with a group of people I don't really know that well. And so I was like trying my best to like process the information as I was hearing it. Asaze called me because he had been there with, he had been the only one there with Daddy. So first I was like trying to process, then I was trying to be there for y'all. So I was trying to be calm. I was trying to keep a certain kind of calm. And yet that thing hit me like, it's just like taking all the breath out of me. So it's like I'm trying to do all of that at the same time. And then I have to try to get back to the United States, get to Jamaica because that's where my dad lived, and then begin planning. And my dad happened to be a public figure, somebody who they wanted to do a big thing for. You know, the government was involved. There was all these people. There's family stuff. There's government. It was like a lot. And so I recognized that entire time, probably from the moment I got the call to the moment the funeral ended, the memorial service ended, I was in a kind of compartment where I was just trying to get through it. And I hadn't yet been able to fully feel the whole impact of it. And I remember falling into Trudy Ann Dixon Smith. I'm going to tell you, because her dad passed away a couple years before that.
Yeah, almost
it felt
2
like
years
3
before.
years before.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah, okay, 2-3 years before. And she somehow recognized this moment. I could see that she saw what was happening, that I had just been carrying this thing, and this moment I just fell right into her arms outside the university chapel. And so definitely, I think that so many people are in that compartmental. I feel like when grief hits us all different, first of all. Each one faces it, feels it differently, shows up differently. And then so many of us are in these compartments. And I'm going to tell you, I'm in therapy. I had to be in grief support group afterwards, therapy weekly afterwards. It's been supporting me. And in a session, somebody talked about the fact that these compartments can be helpful because they can help you go to work. They can help you talk to people regularly, like support you and like putting it away. But to your point, you can't stay there. You see the part where you say don't shrug it off? Maybe you have to shrug it off to a degree at a certain point. But at some point, you do have to come and look at the grief.
Yeah. How can you keep going in a I want to say beneficial way, but like in a positive way in your life if you're not dealing with the real things? That's a real thing.
Yeah.
To just think that it'll pass, that's not gonna work. And to like not be emotional about it, because the thing with Jamaican people, them don't like crying either. So like even men,
I don't care.
Men are like, I know, but beyond Jamaicans, I have a guy friend who is a black man and he's in his 20s and his mother passed away and he didn't want to cry. And I'm like, let me tell you something. I don't know how that feels. Okay, I've lost someone that I love dearly, but not my mother. It's okay to express emotion. And he's like, I want to be strong for my family, my sisters. And I'm like, I know, but what about you too? Like, you matter. So when you were, I'll never forget when I called you to like talk to you about it when we had found out. I'm like, she was, like we're saying, trying to console me because I'm freaking out. I've dealt with passing, like you're saying, Uncle Bobby when he passed. That was so sad. Oh my God. That was like the first real passing that I've had to deal with in my life. And I was, around 19 around that time. When my grandfather passed, I was 21. It's a lot. a lot, and to hear you on the phone being calm to console me, I literally asked her, I said, are you okay? Like,
right, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Let's not talk about me. Are you good? Because I know my mom's relationship with my grandfather.
Yeah.
You know, special place in her heart. She always has had. So it was a lot. And that's why it's like, you had little sprouts of like emotion here and there.
Mm-hmm.
You were pretty much most of the time sad after that had occurred, but like I'm saying, you had a lot of business to handle.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got back from Jamaica after everything was done, it was almost like my mom was in a space of, oh wow, this is my life now. Like, I always hear it's one thing when a person is in your life and they're alive, and you're a whole nother person when they've passed away. I've always heard that, and I felt like that's what I was seeing with you. Like, I was really concerned going back, because I was in my third year, finishing, basically close to finishing my third year in college, so I had to go back. I'd been gone for a month. No work, no school, like it was online, but I wasn't present, and I had to be present. So I had to go back, and I was nervous to leave, because it's like, oh my gosh, you can see the change.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
a
can
lot.
tell you about it.
It's a lot.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
you
share.
said a lot
There's
of things.
people
You said
out
a lot
here
of
that are
things
dealing
there,
with a
too.
lot.
You say a lot of things. So I want to talk about the strong
That's
thing
why
first.
the one mic sometimes don't work. Sometimes you got to be able to catch it when you hear something that I like that you touched on that. Let me get in there before I forget.
So let me. I'm gonna talk about the strong thing, and then I'm gonna talk about coming back and what that was like. But the strong, we have been conditioned as people. I think, especially Black people, and it's not just Jamaican people, into being strong. You have to be strong, and worse, like you said, the young man you're talking about, he's a man. So I think for me as a woman, gendered in the gendered context of the way the world works, you know, people have this idea of women being more emotional. So maybe I can get over that a little bit. But I still had people telling me to be strong. I still had people telling me to be strong. And I'm telling you that is a word we need to take. These are words we need to take out of our vocabulary when we're talking about grieving people. There's no need to be strong.
Yeah.
Right? There's no need to act like this is not what's happening. It's okay to be sad, to fall apart, to kind of like need time to just like gather yourself to figure out how you're going to do this. Right?
Right.
So the second part of that is the coming back. Because I literally, everything fell like fully apart for me when I got back to the United States. I had no motivation to work.
I know.
I wanted to be in bed all the time. I had a job and responsibilities. So I did them because, as somebody once said to me, you know, we look around the world and we see what happens when you don't go to work. You know, when you check out, this system doesn't have any empathy for you.
Oh, no.
So it's not like my mortgage company is going to say, oh, she's grieving.
So we'll give you a pass this month on the bill.
Let's hold on
until
she's feeling better.
Right.
We don't have that kind of society.
No, life is going to keep going.
We don't have that kind of society.
That's what I realized.
So I'm aware of that. Despite everything I'm feeling, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
So I know I have to pull myself up and go out there to the job. But I'm telling you, I would show up to work and I would say things like, I'm really sad today or whatever. And people would be feeling uncomfortable by my sadness. And I had feedback. Oh, you didn't smile. You didn't do this in a meeting or whatever. And I was kind of like, I was like, look, I'm doing my best because I'm here. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the way I kind of did it, is I named it and I would just move through. But I asked for things like, can I work from home more?
Yeah.
You're not feeling comfortable with the way that I'm looking. Can I be at home? So those are the things helped. And then I want to give my manager credit because when I got back, I'm on a health plan and they have these support groups that they do. But it takes a minute to get into the support group because they have to do the intake. And then they have to get the group started and blah, blah, blah. So I get back in March and I don't think they were going to have another group until like April, May. Okay. So that's like a month or two. So my manager was like, look, I have a therapist that will do this for you at a sliding scale rate. And I thought, boom. Let me do that. Let me get into some kind of therapy. So, the part of this that we're talking about, the healing parts, it's like knowing that you're in that darkness. Because literally, I'm telling you, if I could have just stayed in my bed and been there,
you would have.
I would have just done that, right?
And I was gonna say, it's real quick, sorry,
yeah.
but a month to me is so short when you're dealing with things like that.
Oh yeah.
And like I'm saying, in that month, you didn't really. I mean, back to back to plan it was like a week, and then before planning it, we were there for like a week. So that's already 2 weeks gone. Then it happened the next week. And then we had like a few days before we left. So it wasn't much time, like I'm saying, to count as grieving time anyways. You know?
Can I go back to something that comes up for me? The other thing that happened that was so supportive of me was community. And I want to just big up. There were people who wanted to be there for me, like my friend Maxine. She kept saying, let me know if you need me or whatever. But I want to.
When you came back or throughout the journey?
Throughout the journey, because she's in the Bahamas, so she was like, I offered to come to Jamaica, kind of thing. But I want to big up and shout out Auntie Alicia, Auntie Allison, and Auntie Judy. Now these are lifelong. Like Allison and Judy are like lifelong friends, and Alicia is like friend from when, so sister. And I'm telling you, when they showed up in Jamaica to that funeral, I want to shout out another sister, Ina Nia, who showed up to the funeral. Like when people showed up like that, like people from foundation, people from like showed up, and then like what was really transformative too, because I remember the day when I had to go see the body. That was like, there were some moments like when I flew into Jamaica and I was walking into Daddy's house for the first time and he wasn't there. So that was a key moment. Going to the funeral home to view the body before it was cremated, key moment, like, and then the service. And I'm gonna tell you, Auntie Alicia had lunch with me before I went to view the body. Like, there were people who just showed up. Auntie Isis, like I'm telling you, the people who just showed up, especially like the foundation, like there's something about people who know you, who see you, who love you, who are willing to say, I'm gonna come. I'm gonna be there. If it's even just to hold your hand and sit here quietly. That I had in like an above. So when the funeral was over, we went to stay in Trelawney at this beach that I'd been to at Daddy before. That was helpful. To do stuff like that where we were all together and the aunties I just named were there. To do things like that together helped. So in the shifting over from like what's grief like to what's healing like, healing is a process. And I believe we're going to be on a healing journey as long as we're here on the planet.
For sure.
I think it's something we're going to be healing.
Lifelong.
But this grief thing.
Lifelong.
This grief thing, because I'm coming up on the 2-year anniversary and I still miss my dad.
Oh, you
every
always
day.
Miss him. I'll always miss him.
Every day.
That's what I'll learn.
And so having community of support, having some support, whether it's therapy, support groups, having maybe the time to lay in your bed.
Right.
And not feel bad about it, and don't let nobody tell you. And if you have things to go take care of because the society doesn't allow for you to stay, if you don't have the savings, because there are people who probably have the savings. There are people who
savings
probably
to
have,
take more time.
Yeah,
off.
So there are people who probably say, 6 months, 1 year.
And that's a privilege.
Right. So there are people who have that, and if y'all have that, take the time.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, like I know I didn't have it, and I was like, what? Right? If you don't have it, then I say take as much time as you have available to you. And this bereavement thing, these jobs in like here give you 3 to 5 days for the bereavement leave. And I'm gonna just shout out, that's not enough, people. Let's work on the bereavement policy to give people more time. But anyway, take the time that you have.
They're not giving out no money though. They're like,
we know how the society works.
Healing and come back to work. That's what they're thinking.
Episode.
Heal and come back to work.
Yeah, get back to work. Productivity.
Cry a little and get on this laptop.
Right. Let's get it
paid for nothing.
Right. Exactly.
Fix it.
Exactly.
Fix it, Jesus.
But what I'm gonna say is, take the time you need. and then do the things that you can.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's therapy, whether that's a support group, whether that is resting a little bit more in the evening, finding some time to go for a walk, connecting with your communities of support. Whatever that is for you, find the time to do it. What do you do to support yourself?
Because see, this is why I say I break up and I try to interrupt.
What's the younger
because
generation?
You made a point earlier.
Oh, did I?
Yes,
Okay.
mother. I'm trying to say, when you were like, oh, community, big up these people. I'll say I really appreciated all my aunties as well. That woman named Auntie Julia, Auntie Allie, Auntie Alicia. But also, I want to big up one of my friends, Kayla. Kayla, she was the only person, I'll never forget this. She was the only person to text me. She texted me the morning of Grandpa's service. I did not realize that she would have. I don't know if I told her when it was. I don't remember. But she texted me and was like sending me kind words, reassuring words that I needed. Because I'm like, oh my God, the day's here. I'm not ready for this. And I'll never forget that. So I always appreciate her for that. We actually share that in common, losing our grandfathers in a certain time period. You know, so I will always be appreciative of her for that. But also, Auntie Denise Bishop, she reached out to me via WhatsApp the day of my grandfather's passing, because it was streamed. I remember they were streaming it, and she was watching, and she saw me kind of break down at the funeral, and she sent me kind words as well. So, and I appreciate a bunch of other people as well for like,
I love her,
being able to be there to rub my back every now and then and tell me it's gonna be all right and it's okay. But yeah, I would definitely say those two people.
And can we talk about something people don't like to talk about?
Which is what?
How families can act up when there's grief happening.
That is true.
Can I talk about that
but you know something? They say weddings and funerals are a big time for family disputes and family disrespect and challenges. That's what they say. So
I want to say something, because this is, it's interesting when you're on your grief journey. When you're on your grief, now I'm gonna be really careful. I promise. When you're on your grief journey, some little stuff will come in to try to like knock you down. And I remember, because you mentioned the funeral and it was streaming, and I remember that one of the speakers on the funeral was like saying some stuff that was a little challenging to absorb,
Oh Lord.
And I remember sitting there just kind of like doing my best to tune it out and doing my best to kind of like have empathy, knowing that this person has their own journey and their own stuff, and then I knew that, Megan and, other family members were coming to kind of like keep it going the way we need it. And then we was going to be, so there's going to be lots of love to take it, to kind of, but it occurred to me how hard this process can be when you have those challenging moments. When you have somebody going left in a moment where it's so important to kind of like
stay on track.
Stay right.
Please.
And so what was actually supportive about that moment too, because like you mentioned it being live stream, people were like texting and calling and like, yo, like just what's going on? But yo, you did great. And like, it still is okay. They still honor his legacy. Like there was like that moments of grief. I want to say it's not linear. Grief is not linear. And there's a lot of stuff that will come through that's going to be can be really challenging. And what I keep telling people 2 years in, my nervous system is different. I have more anxiety. I've been experiencing more anxiety. I've been feeling myself get more triggered and have more trauma responses in times, right? I feel myself where like my mental health and well-being is like on a kind of like, we're on a like a little precipice. It's like a little thing where I'm standing right at the edge and I have to be careful because I can feel that just a little push can take me over. Yeah. And that concerns me because I feel that. And maybe it's my mindfulness practice. I don't know how I get to be so tuned. So I work, you gonna recognize this refrain. I work on protecting my peace. No. Protecting my peace at all costs. have young adults living with you. I'ma just say.
What does that, girl?
I'ma just say.
I was going to find a moment.
Be kind of like this.
To put that in
And
the
so
conversation.
I be unprotected. My
Don't
peace.
understand.
Because grief will take you there. So
that's true.
how do you,
What was the question you were
I
asking
was
me
saying,
before?
how do
I'm sorry.
you take care of yourself? Like, what's the
Ooh,
thing
that's
that
a
you
good
do to
question.
support yourself through grief?
Journaling has been a big thing for me. Like, there was a point where I was talking to a therapist because, you know, they recommend that. I was going through a lot when we got back. So when we were in Jamaica, my mom was like, I think it would be a good idea for you to talk to a therapist. I was like, I was against it. I was like, I don't know about all that. Then I was like, okay, maybe, because a lot was going on in my life. It was more than just the grief.
And that's the thing too. We gotta jump in to say,
it was a lot.
life doesn't stop.
I said that,
right? But I mean, like,
life
meaning
is
not
literally
bills,
gonna keep going,
not bills, like
beyond
other
that.
things.
Oh yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, the bills don't stop, but everything else doesn't stop either.
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
life will always life. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I did therapy, and I'll never get. My therapist was like, "Why don't you write a letter to your grandfather?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a lot. That was interesting. Because, like I said, I told you already, I had regrets. One of the biggest ones was when I found out that my grandfather was going to the hospital to go to the doctor. It was still COVID, but it was not 2020. It was 2022, like we're talking. So I'm like, okay, like I said, he's been to the doctor and come back and been fine. So I just thought that's what was going to happen again.
Yeah.
Nobody could have told me I was not going to talk to my grandfather again. And I'll never forget, my brother said, I knew I should have told you to pick up the phone and call him. And that is something I will always wish that I did. And regret that I did not do. I didn't call my grandfather, you know, and that will always be something I carry. Always. Because, like I said, nobody could have told me that I could never call him again.
Yeah.
You know, so in dealing with it, I got to write and put that in my letter. But journaling, I think being able to have people to talk to, for me, I think therapy's fine. But when you're talking to Black people and Jamaican people and Caribbean people, that may not always be on everybody's to-do list.
True.
Which I know from experience.
Yeah. True.
So, being able to have a community, like my mom is saying, but that may not be a circle. That may be a friend that relates. Like, my friend Kayla and I, we could talk about these things. Was I always ready to bring it up? No, because it's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
We had different, like, a lot was going on for both of us. We deal with grief differently. So being able to talk to people, being able to acknowledge grief, I feel like is a big step. You know, but that's how I've really dealt with it. Journaling, being able to speak about it. Holding in things never works out well for me. It never does. So I try to have a little conversation.
But, you know, can I take it from the micro to the macro? Because, you know, the thing that is really present for me, and I did a short TikTok or reel or whatever they want to call it nowadays, about this. Excuse me. But like, because I know that I have had to deal, even getting through the funeral service was like this compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
Like, I recognize that the folks who are in Palestine, for example, experiencing this genocide, when they have multiple people in their families murdered, killed, when they have their babies, and I'm talking about newborns and young ones, and just like a couple of days ago, there was a 6-year-old that they found her body after she had been missing, and you know, there's so much of that, plus generations. So like, it's happening across the spectrum of life, meaning the babies, the children, the men, women, and gender expansive people, you know, the people of all genders, and then there's the elders, right? So they're losing, like, death is taking, grief And I really love the fact that they talk about them as martyrs. They'll give it a spiritual feeling to it. But ultimately, they are experiencing this on a daily basis. And my question is, when will they have time to grieve? To properly grieve, because it's still ongoing. And so I really wanted to shine a light on the collective grief that they're experiencing. And then when I think about Sudan and the Congo, and there was someone talking about, the rape and the sexual assaults that are happening in some of those spaces. And there's grief of that. Like, the fact is, grief, there's death.
Comes in many forms.
Right. So there's death. There's the heartbreak of an ending of a relationship. There's the loss of a job or the loss of something else. But like, the loss, I think, of humanity, meaning like to be violated. Mm-hmm. When you're violated, there's a grief. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. When you're experiencing sexual assault or displacement, you have no home. Right? Because so millions of people right now are displaced. So there's the grief of, I don't have a home to go to. So there's so much grief, is my point. And I kind of, I'm working on like holding that. Like, what does that mean for these families, for the families experiencing this? And what will the grief that's coming up for them look like, feel like? When will they get to feel it? Will they get to process it? The things that we're talking about healing, what will that look like for them? It's almost like a question that I'm throwing out into the ether. Yeah.
Because I definitely don't have that answer.
No, I don't.
So,
yeah.
But I did want to say one thing about healing is letting go, being able to let it out. Like in the movie Origin, there's a part where Isabel Wilkerson is talking to her friend and breaks down, and she's like, I just want to scream, and her friend is like, scream.
Yeah.
You want to do it. What? You have to let these things out. Mm-hmm. That's how I think that is a start to healing. Is that going to heal? Hell no, it's not going to heal the whole thing. But you cannot just keep it in and restrain it. I don't think that's going to do anything. Mm-hmm. But make you feel more trapped and enclosed in grief, Mm-hmm. Being able to release it. And it may not all happen in one go. Like I said, it's so many. There are times, I'll never forget, we had a Mother's Day, like lunch with one of Mommy's friends, and her father is from Trinidad, and he was speaking, and he's around my grandfather's age, older, and, everybody in the Caribbean knows that all accents throughout the Caribbean are different. But just the way he was speaking and how he viewed things and just hearing him talk, it had me emotional. I literally tears came out, and I'm like, oh my God, you remind me of my grandfather. And that's a year after after my grandfather passed away. And to this day, there are days where I'm more down and sad, and there's ways that I need to release that. Mm-hmm. You got to deal with it. You cannot let it control you and take you up. That's what I think is a big part of healing.
You know what I can say to close us out on this? Mm-hmm. There was someone, I was in a group once of like a working professional group, so it's a work-related group. But we're like talking about leadership and talking about different things. And someone asked the question like, what's getting in the way of your work? Like what? And I said grief. I was like, well, my grief is getting in the way, right? Because at the time it was fresher, it was newer. And an elder in the space said, there's nothing to do. Let grief work in your life. Allow it to do what it does in your life. And don't try to like push it away or act like it's not happening. Just be with it and let it work in your life. And I remember looking at her like, because she had to be, I would say just by looking at her, and I think she shared her age. She was like in her 80s or something. Mm-hmm. But like it was like from a place of, I know this really well, And I looked at her and I thought, I think absolutely that's what I took in that moment and keep is it. I just allow it to be in my life. I recognize that it's here. I recognize that it'll be different on different days.
Yeah.
That some days I'll be like, ooh, yeah. And some days I'll be like, oof.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
All right.
You don't gotta be, what we say, you don't gotta be strong all the time. That's all
And
right.
don't take that word out. You don't have to be strong. I'm going to say, be strong out of the grief vocabulary. When you're grieving, just don't even think about that. Be.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
That's my wisdom for today.
Grief and healing, take it with a grain of salt. Everybody might not agree. That's okay. Everybody got their own journey. That's what we saying up here.
Yeah.
But I think, be. That's what I'm saying. Be.
Snaps on that.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll be back.
Bye, y'all.
Real talk about real things across generations. Generational banter.
Real talk about real things across generations. Generational